Welcome to today's deep dive. Um, our mission today is to decode something that honestly feels like magic, but is actually, pure technique.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally technical once you break it down.
Right. We are talking about mastering the art of painting a really striking, highly textured sunset that just completely grabs your attention.
And to figure this out, we're looking at some amazing instructional materials from the great artist Laura Palacios.
Yeah, she's a really key figure associated with GRUPO RAIIM, and we've got her detailed videos and texts to guide us.
It's a fantastic method. Really eye-opening stuff.
It is. So, to start us off, I want you to imagine this scene for a second. You're standing at an easel. You've got this pristine blank canvas right in front of you.
The intimidating blank canvas.
Exactly. And in your head, you have this image of the most spectacular sunset you've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, like those really breathtaking, contrasting colors.
Exactly. You want those brilliant blues high up in the sky, the glowing oranges cutting across the horizon, and those yellows that literally look like they're emitting their own light.
Right, you want it to glow.
But when you actually put the brush to the canvas, something just goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, it usually does for beginners.
Instead of a radiant sky, you end up with this flat, muddy mess, just an opaque, lifeless blur.
It's the classic brown soup.
Yes. It's exactly like trying to cook without a plan. Like, imagine walking into a kitchen and throwing all your favorite ingredients into one single pot.
Oh, no.
Right. You've got chocolate, garlic, strawberries, steak, all delicious on their own.
But you boil them all together at once.
Exactly. You don't get a gourmet meal. You just get this confusing, brown, inedible soup.
That is the perfect analogy. And that visual brown soup is, well, it's the tragic fate of almost every beginner painter.
So what are they actually doing wrong?
Well, the Meister tackles this right away. The fundamental mistake is impatience. Beginners try to mix all the sky and ground colors directly on the canvas, all at the same time.
While the paint is still completely wet.
Yes, exactly. The novice logic is, the sky is blue, the horizon is orange, the ground is dark. So they just load up the brush and attack the canvas.
Hoping it'll just magically blend into a sunset.
Right. But by trying to blend it all right there, the wet pigments violently crash into each other.
Because blue and orange are complementary colors, right?
Exactly. In color theory, when you mix opposites while they're wet, they neutralize each other. Mathematically, you get gray, or, like you said, that opaque mud.
Which completely destroys the illusion of light.
It totally kills it. You lose all the purity of the pigment. And to make it worse, they usually try to draw the horizon line freehand with wet paint.
Oh, I've seen that. It gets so messy.
It's chaotic. You end up with crooked lines that just ruin the perspective before you even establish the mood of the painting.
So, really, the issue isn't even about picking the wrong colors from the tube. It's a structural collapse.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like trying to build a roof when your concrete foundation is still totally wet. The whole house just sinks.
Exactly. Everything collapses into mud.
So if mixing wet on wet is a death sentence for our sunset, how do we stop these colors from colliding?
Well, before we even pick up a brush, we have to understand this core artistic principle. It honestly borders on physics.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Physics.
Yeah, it's all about color temperature and how it behaves optically. Colors don't just have a hue, right? They have visual weight and direction.
Correction, like they actually move.
Optically, yes. Warm colors, like your yellows, oranges, and reds, they have wavelengths that our eyes process in a very specific way.
Because of how light hits the retina.
Exactly. The human eye physically adjusts differently to focus on these warm waves. It makes our brain perceive warm colors as being closer to us.
Oh, wow. So they advance toward you.
Yes, they seem to jump off the canvas. But cool colors, on the other hand, like deep blues, violets, grays, they recede. They feel like they're falling back into the distance.
That makes so much sense. If you don't know that rule, you're literally fighting the physics of light.
You're setting yourself up to fail.
Like if you try to force a dark blue to feel really immediate and close, or you try to hide a bright yellow way in the back, the viewer's brain is going to reject it.
Totally. They'll just feel like something is off, even if they can't articulate why.
Okay, so knowing that yellow naturally wants to pop out at you, how does Laura Palacios actually solve the muddy soup problem?
Her method is brilliant because it's so counterintuitive. To build a light that actually glows, she does not start by painting a blue sky or clouds.
What does she do?
The GRUPO RAIIM process begins with a completely flat, homogeneous base of pure yellow across the entire canvas, edge to edge.
Just a giant yellow rectangle.
Yep. But here's the wild part. She doesn't use a brush.
Wait, what? She doesn't use a brush.
Nope. She uses a sponge to apply this entire first layer of acrylic. This yellow is the hidden light of the whole piece.
And then she paints over it right away.
No, that's the most critical step. She steps back and lets that yellow dry completely. Absolutely bone dry.
Okay, I have to stop you there. I'm getting hung up on the sponge.
Haha, why is that?
Well, when I think of fine art, classical painting, I think of the majesty of the brush stroke.
The romantic ideal of the painter.
Yeah, actually. The texture of the paint, the expressive movement. Using a sponge sounds so mechanical, like you're priming a garage wall or something. Why give up the brush stroke?
I get that,
Right.
but the visual logic here is flawless. At this stage, the maestra isn't looking for personal expression or texture. She wants absolute control of the light.
Because a brush would leave marks.
Exactly. A sponge eliminates all those little microscopic ridges and valleys that bristles leave behind.
Oh, I see.
If she used a brush, those tiny textured valleys would create microscopic shadows when they dry, and the next layers of paint would pool in them irregularly.
So by using the sponge, it doesn't even read as paint anymore. It's just pure flat light.
You nailed it. It acts exactly like a primer on a wall. It gives a perfectly smooth stage for the top layers to glide over without any tactile distractions.
It's like she's installing the filament of a giant light bulb inside the canvas before she even turns it on.
That is a brilliant way to picture it.
So once that perfect yellow base is totally dry, what's next?
She uses paper masking tape straight across the canvas to create a perfectly crisp horizon line.
Ah, so no more crooked, chaotic horizons.
Exactly. And because that yellow base is already dry, when she starts adding the sky colors, there's zero risk of the blue and yellow mixing physically to make green.
Because the yellow is basically locked in.
Right. So she builds the sky directly over the dry yellow. She starts with a pure orange, but really diluted with water or an acrylic medium.
And she puts that right above the tape.
Yes, from the horizon moving up. Since the orange is translucent, that solid yellow base just shines right through it, making it super vibrant.
And then she brings in the blue.
Yeah, for the top of the sky, she does a top-down gradient. She uses Prussian blue, which is this incredibly deep, dark blue, but she mixes it with a cream color.
Oh, nice.
And again, she uses a clean sponge to blend that creamy blue down into the orange, keeping it super soft and atmospheric.
It's crazy how such a massive sky is just reduced to these really controlled, calculated layers.
That's all about method.
But we have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to sunsets.
The sun itself.
The sun. I have seen so many amateur painters try to put a sun in their sky, and it always looks like a giant fried egg stuck to the canvas.
Fried egg syndrome. Oh, it's a classic problem in art classes.
It just ends up being this harsh, rigid circle, like a cheap magazine cutout glued to the painting.
It happens because people treat the sun like a solid object with hard edges. But optically, the sun is just this overwhelming radiation that burns your eyes.
So how does the great artist avoid the fried egg?
Precision. First, she actually uses a ruler to measure the exact center of the canvas.
A ruler. Wow.
Yeah, because if the main light source is off-center in a sunset like this, it throws off the whole composition. Then, she takes a cat tongue brush.
A cat tongue brush? What's that?
It's a flat synthetic brush, but the edges are rounded off. It literally looks like a cat's tongue. She loads it with a really dense cream color.
Wait, cream? Why not just squeeze pure titanium white or bright cadmium yellow straight from the tube?
I mean, that's what most people do, right?
Yeah. It's the sun. It should be the brightest thing on the palette.
It sounds logical, but it's a trap. If you use pure titanium white, the sun looks cold, chalky. It almost looks like a hole punched in the canvas.
Because white absorbs the temperature around it.
Exactly. Next to orange, pure white can look grayish. And if you use pure yellow, it just vanishes because the whole underlying base of the painting is already yellow.
Oh, right. You'd lose it entirely.
So cream is the perfect balance.
Well.
It's incredibly bright, so it gives you that high tonal value, but it has a warm temperature that harmonizes with the sky.
That is so smart.
And once she paints that cream circle, she doesn't stop there. She immediately takes a nearly dry brush and blurs the edges of the wet circle.
Ah, blurring the edges.
Yeah, it's a technique called esfumado. She softly and repeatedly strokes the edges so they melt imperceptibly into the orange sky.
So it's not a hard circle anymore.
Right. And she even takes whatever paint is left on the brush and dabs tiny, almost invisible specks of light into the surrounding clouds to spread the glow.
It's like music.
How you mean?
Painting a hard-edged sun is like just slamming a piano key and taking your finger right off. It's abrupt, it's loud, it's almost an annoying noise. That's the fried egg.
I love that.
But the esfumato technique, blurring those edges, it's like hitting the key and holding down the sustain pedal. You let the note ring out and gently fade into the rest of the melody.
Yes. The esfumato is literally the visual echo of the light. Without it, the sun just feels fake.
So now we have this gorgeous, glowing top half of the painting.
Yep, the sky is done. Super soft, built with sponges and translucent layers. But nature needs balance. We need contrast for the ground.
Because the ground can't be all soft and glowing, right?
Exactly. So she does something really dramatic here. She peels the tape off the horizon, moves it up, and sticks it over the finished sky to protect it.
Okay.
And then she ditches the brushes and sponges entirely. She grabs a metal paint spatula.
A spatula.
Okay,
Okay, we're getting into heavy texture now. But wait, if she's applying heavy paint, doesn't she risk making that brown suit again?
You would think so, but the tool changes the physics of it. She starts by doing what she calls ironing the paint.
Ironing, like clothes.
Exactly like that. She uses the flat edge of the spatula to press a thin layer of orange acrylic right over the bottom half of the canvas, directly onto that original yellow base.
Okay, so it's flat but has some body to it.
Right. And then, while that orange is still wet, she starts layering dark, cold colors on top with the spatula.
Wait. Dark colors on top of wet orange. Isn't that breaking the ultimate rule? That's going to make mud.
If she used a brush, yes. A bristle brush scrubs the paint, mixing the wet layers together into mud.
But a spatula is different.
A spatula glides. It just drops the heavy paint on top. It sits there without chemically mixing.
Oh, so it just stacks on top of the wet layer.
Precisely. So near the horizon, she drops a mix of Prussian blue and cream to make the ground look distant. Then pure Prussian blue closer up in these irregular textured spots.
Okay.
And for the absolute darkest shadows right in the foreground, she uses Payne's gray.
Hold on. Why not just use black paint? If you want maximum darkness for a silhouetted ground, isn't black the obvious choice?
Never use pure black for a landscape shadow.
Really? Why not?
Black, straight from the tube, is a visual void. It absorbs all light and kills the temperature. If you put pure black next to a glowing orange, it literally looks like a hole in the fabric.
Oh, I see. It's too harsh.
Yeah. Payne's gray is actually a deeply cold blue. It just looks black at first glance.
So it still has color in it.
Exactly. Because it's a dark blue, it acts as a perfect complementary color to the warm oranges, giving you massive contrast without killing the harmony.
That makes total sense. So she's got all this heavy, wet, dark blue and gray paint sitting on the canvas.
Yes, and here is the absolute climax of the GRUPO RAIIM method. The real magic isn't what she just put on the canvas.
Okay, what is it?
She takes off the tape to reveal the sky. Then she takes a small, clean spatula and a cotton cloth. And with quick, confident strokes, she starts scraping the wet paint away.
She takes off.
She physically rips chunks of that thick blue and gray paint right off the canvas. And as the metal blade scrapes away the dark, wet top layer, it hits the bottom.
It hits the dry yellow base.
Yes, the blade slips right over the dry acrylic, revealing the hidden light from step one.
Oh, wow.
By varying the pressure, she selectively uncovers flashes of that radiant yellow and orange underneath.
That is incredible.
It creates instant texture like rocky terrain or grassy plains catching the sunset without having to sit there and mix a dozen brown tones on a palette.
It's subtractive. We always think of painting as adding layers, adding color on top of color. But this is like sculpting.
Sculpting the light. That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
You're literally carving away the shadows to unearth the light that was trapped underneath.
Exactly. Though Laura Palacios does warn her students, there's a ticking clock here.
Because acrylic paint dries so fast.
Yes. If you're working on a big canvas, you have to use a much thicker layer of acrylic for that dark stage. If it dries before you scrape it, you're locked out.
You can't uncover the light once it's plastic.
Exactly. You have to extend the open time of the paint. You have to wipe your spatula on the cloth after every single scrape too, or you'll just smear dark paint back into the light.
That's the difference between just watching a tutorial and actually mastering the medium, right? Knowing the physics of drying times.
Completely. Now, at this point, you'd think the painting is totally finished.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a perfect sky, a glowing sun, textured ground, and a razor-sharp horizon line thanks to the tape. Sounds done to me.
But a razor-sharp horizon is actually an optical lie.
Wait, but we use the tape specifically to make it sharp.
I know, but the final stroke of genius from the maestra happens once everything is dry. She takes a clean brush and slightly blurs that perfect horizon line
Why ruin the perfection?
because the atmosphere isn't transparent.
Yeah.
Think about a mountain 10 miles away. Between your eye and that mountain, there's a massive ocean of air.
Full of dust and water vapor.
Right. And all those particles scatter the blue light waves. It's called Rayleigh scattering. It's why distant mountains look pale and blurry.
Oh, atmospheric perspective.
Yes. If your horizon is sharp as a knife, the viewer's brain thinks the ground is only 10 feet away. By blurring it just a fraction, you simulate miles of atmosphere.
You force the brain to see colossal distance.
You turn a flat canvas into a three-dimensional portal.
So you start with dictatorial control, taping things off, separating the sky and the ground. But true mastery is knowing the exact moment to let go of that control.
You have to surrender to the laws of nature eventually.
That's profound.
When you look at the whole method, the biggest takeaway isn't just about using a sponge or a spatula.
What is it then?
It's that creating something emotionally resonant depends almost entirely on foundations that no one will ever see.
The hidden layers.
Exactly. If someone walked in while you were sponging on that flat yellow base, they'd think you were just painting a wall. They wouldn't see a masterpiece.
But without that dry, invisible yellow layer, scraping the spatula would just reveal blank white canvas.
Right. It would have no soul. The success of the surface depends totally on the integrity of what you've hidden beneath it. The yellow was the engine the whole time.
It's what actually illuminates the final piece. That is so cool. And, understanding this, how warm colors advance, how cool colors recede, how hidden light works, it changes everything.
It changes how you see the world, really.
Definitely. It doesn't just apply to a canvas in a museum. These optical laws are constantly working on us. So for you listening right now, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you're walking through your city and you pass a really imposing building, or you walk into a cafe and instantly feel super cozy and relaxed, or even tonight if you just watch the real sunset from your window, just stop for a second.
Take it all in.
Right, and ask yourself, how much of your emotional reaction in that exact moment is being secretly controlled by color temperature?
Where are the cool tones pulling back, giving you space?
Yes, and where are the warm woods or orange lights advancing to visually embrace you? Try to look past the surface and spot the hidden base layer, because once you learn how to see the mechanics of light, the real world is honestly the most fascinating canvas there is.